when I was flying in the Air Force, if somebody would have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said yes, if asked.
Right.
But I would not have like voluntarily brought that up. And part of that was because I knew that my lifestyle and my testimony was in the trash. Exactly. So I can't open my mouth to tell anybody about Christ because people just look at me like, "Are you freaking kidding?"
Right.
Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. Men's Alliance is a growing movement of tribes across the nation that meet weekly for rugged outdoor workouts and a real-world devotion around a fire. If you want to be a part of what we're doing, join us at men'salliancetribe.com, where you can find a tribe near you or come to one of our Start the Fire weekends. So check us out at men'salliancetribe.com. Now stay tuned for this great podcast.
Welcome to the Men's Alliance podcast. I'm, as you know, Dusty Parker, call sign Shadow, and we have Goose with us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
This podcast has been years in the making. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, of just wanting, for me personally, and for everybody who watches, Goose's story of just where he was from, his background, how Men's Alliance came to be. So I'm really excited about this one. Like I said, it's been a long time coming. So thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah. It's one of those things where when Men's Alliance first started, I was sharing this around the fire, and most of the OGs that have been with me, they of course know my story, but then as it's grown, you've pointed out to me, hey, you got to do it again.
Yeah.
Right. And you got to do it on a podcast. So yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's finally time.
Yeah. What really happened is our real guest canceled. So we
got nothing.
We
today.
got nothing else to do. No, I'm just kidding. But so yeah, dude, just tell me. All right, I am born, or you are
starting
born
from scratch.
Yeah.
Man, I was
C-section or no? I'm kidding.
I will tell you this. So my mom went into labor in the hospital on Valentine's Day.
Oh wow,
that's coming up. But I was running late, and birthday is the 15th.
Okay.
So
easy to remember.
Yeah, I was actually born in Florida.
Oh,
I was born in Hollywood, Florida. My dad was down there working at Florida Bible College and a ministry down there to Jewish people. It was called Seaside Mission, and so we moved away. We moved to Indiana when I was like 3, so I don't really remember much about it. But yeah, born in Florida, and so grew up in a Christian home, and spent a couple years in Indiana. But then our family moved to North Carolina, and that's really where I'm from. Like that's where I did all my growing up, was North Carolina. Went to high school there, went to college there. My dad, he started a Christian counseling business in Florida. Yeah. I'm sorry, in North Carolina.
Yeah.
So he went to seminary and got his master's of divinity and a master's of counseling, and came back to his hometown where he was from. And he started family counseling, and he was a local pastor.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I knew the pastor. I didn't know about the
taught Bible classes at the Christian high school.
Oh, cool.
Where I went. So I couldn't ever get away from him or the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. It was like church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and youth group. And then I'd go to private Christian school, and my dad was teaching Bible class.
So if the church doors were open, you were there.
Yeah. That was me. And met my wife, Carrie. We met in high school.
Okay.
She actually had my dad for homeroom.
Oh, wow.
And she met him before she knew me.
So what grade?
We met, I probably had seen her, passing in the hallway, knew her, but didn't really meet her until my junior year of high school.
Wow.
Her senior year of high school. She's a year older. And we were just hanging out in the same friend group. And then we started dating after she graduated high school. I had a year left. We started dating, and and then we dated distance through college. She went to Liberty. I went to UNC Greensboro. And so
What led you there? Greensboro.
UNC Greensboro, there are 16 UNCGs, since you ask.
Okay.
And that's the cheapest one.
Oh, okay.
And so I was trying to keep my student loans as small as possible.
Yeah.
I went to a small private college in Nyack, New York, my freshman year.
Oh, wow.
It was NAIA division at the time. Now it would be like D3. And I played soccer there my freshman year. And then, you know, my knees weren't doing well, which knees have always been a big part of my story, but transferred to UNCG to start saving a lot of money. And my best friend growing up was there.
Cool.
And so I roomed with him. And, you know, so I grew up playing soccer.
Yeah.
I played 4 seasons a year.
Yeah.
I would play, you know, for the school, I'd play spring, I'd play indoor, and I'd play travel. I was like, it felt like I was like, this was before travel sports were really popular and everybody played. It was like this new novel thing.
Yeah.
And so that was my kind of my life was soccer through high school and freshman year of college. I had 2 knee surgeries from soccer.
Oh, wow. In college?
High school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it was pretty bad. My knee was kind of coming apart. And so a big part of my story is my whole life I wanted to be in the military.
Yeah.
Like you could have asked me when I was 5 what I wanted to be. And it was always, I want to be in the military.
Specifically the Air Force or just military? No, you hadn't made your mind up yet. Just
never
military.
The Air Force, actually.
Oh, really?
I went through huge phases of Army.
Yeah.
And huge phases of Marines. And then I started.
You probably couldn't handle the Marines.
You're correct. I could not. And that's a story in and of itself. And then I thought briefly Navy. I was kind of Navy for a while. And then kind of came back and settled on Marines.
Yeah.
My junior year of college, I went to Marine Corps Officer Candidate School in Quantico.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, joined platoon leaders class.
You never told me this.
PLC juniors.
Yeah, I was thinking today. I was like, he would have made a great infantry officer. Like,
and they actually offered me because I had 20/20 vision and my scores were good. They offered me. This is how much I didn't want to go into the Air Force.
Yeah,
the Marine Corps offered me a flight contract.
Oh, wow!
And I didn't want it.
Why?
Because I wanted to stab people through the heart. I didn't want to fly over their heads.
Yeah.
And the captain who was like doing my paperwork, recruiting for OCS, he was like, "You're freaking crazy."
Yeah.
He was like, "You've got 20/20 vision, and they're offering you this contract. You can fly F-18s off carriers, man." And I was like, "No, thanks." Right. So anyway, I go to OCS, and I'm there for just a couple weeks. The deal was at that time you do 6 weeks one summer while you're in college, and then you go back and you do another 6 weeks the next summer. So they kind of tailored this college program, and I was in that first half program when I ripped out my ACL. So that was like the third surgery, last straw. So I came, they flew me from Quantico to get surgery in Charlotte, North Carolina, and woke up from that surgery, and the doctor was like, "You have no ACL. There's nothing in there. There's nothing to repair. It's all gone." Wow. And I was like, "Where'd it go?" I remember asking him that. I was like, "How does it go somewhere? Where did it go?" He goes, "Oh, it gets absorbed back into your body." Oh. And I was like, "What does that mean? Will I be able to run again? Like, I don't know what happens if you don't have an ACL."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, about 50% of the people that don't have them never miss them, and they're just fine without it. And the other half can't run without it." And I'm like laying there, just woke up from this surgery. He's talking to me, and he goes, "We'll just get you physical therapy. We'll get you fixed up, and then we'll see which group you're in."
Do you have to have one to be in the military? Like, is it a requirement to have an ACL?
No, they don't.
As long as you can.
They just check if you can run.
Do it, right? Yeah.
So that was a big part of my story was, I had wanted to do this stuff, and now felt like that dream was kind of slipping away. Like, okay, this is my third knee surgery. And I actually spent the entire school year, the next school year, of my junior year, training, preparing, getting back in shape, rehabilitating my knee, fully planning to go back to Quantico the next summer. And, but I was really doubting if my knee would make it too. I was like, man, 3 surgeries, no ACL. I really got to start being honest with myself here. So,
and just not even making it through the course, just a lifetime of rucking and war fighting.
Yeah, it's like after that, that's just the beginning.
That's just the beginning.
And I was, so exactly right. So I had this really cool night where Carrie and I, we went back to my parents for, we drove back down to Salisbury. We had dinner with my parents. And long story short, there was a whole bunch of men there that were my dad's friends that were over at his house that night. And they were all retired from different branches of the military. And I wound up sitting around having coffee with them that night. And every single one of them said, if I had it to do over again, I would have gone Air Force. Retired Marine. He said, don't ever tell anybody I said this.
Right.
But if I had to do over again, I would go Air Force. And right beside of him, retired Navy. Guy goes, oh, absolutely. I would have gone Air Force. And so,
did they tell you why? They get into specifics?
Oh, yeah. We went into a million details. And so we got in the car that night, me and Carrie, to drive back to our apartment. And this is kind of also a story about how dense I can be. Carrie was like, you realize what just happened? I'm like, no, what do you mean? And she's like, that was God. Like, that was a God thing, that we were even at their house that night, that those men were there while you're at this intersection, crossroads in your life. And God just had those men speak that into your life. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. So that's what got me started thinking. So then I started looking into the Air Force for the first time. I'm like, well, I know my knee can make the Air Force.
Right.
I know I can jog through Marine. Air Force training.
Right.
No problem. So I felt like if I went back, I was like, man, if I mess my knee up again, if I screw it up again, it could be that nobody's going to take me.
Right.
And that was my fear. I was like, if I go for this again and ruin all my chances. So anyway,
so it didn't deter you from the military completely. It was just, all right, you still had the dream of being in the military.
That's right.
And it was just which one.
So
did you know what you wanted to do in the Air Force?
No. I was like, cool, I'll be an officer in the Air Force. And
you hadn't graduated college yet?
I was starting my senior year.
What were you studying?
My major was communication.
Oh, okay. Classic.
The major you get when you can't pick a major. I actually changed majors so many times. And it took me 4.5 years to graduate college. I had an extra semester in there because I took too many electives. And so, but my passion was always history. So my minor was in history, and I was more passionate about my minor than my major. So, but communication was a cool degree because it gave me like a lot of speaking experience. So history, I go Air Force, obviously, graduate college, commission as a second lieutenant, and I got assigned to become a navigator. And I did not know what that was. And
so you could have been pilot or navigator, or
actually it's kind of weird. I don't want to go into too much detail, but because I took this program, so the Air Force had a shortage of officers forecasted that year. So they created a 1-year ROTC program. And because I had 1 year left in college, it kind of fit. But the deal was, and they told me this up front, they were like, the 1-year program, pilot and nav is not eligible for 1-year program guys. And they were like, so if you want to be a flyer, you can't do the 1-year program. And I didn't care anyway. I was like, honestly, don't care what I do in the Air Force. I just want to be an officer. And I thought there's a bunch of great jobs. I was pretty naive and stupid. but I didn't care. And so a couple days later, they called me back. I'd already signed the paperwork. They called me back a few days later and said, hey, they opened up navigator to 1-year guys. They're forecasting a shortage in navigators. Do you want to throw your name in that hat? And I was like, I don't know. Do I? Is that a good thing? And he goes, This is a fight. He was a non-flyer.
Okay.
He was like an intel officer in the Air Force, and he said anything in the Air Force flying is better than anything not flying.
Right.
Just do it. Get in the plane.
Yeah.
So I did it, and I got it. And so Carrie and I graduate college, commission. We loaded up the car in North Carolina and drove to San Antonio, Texas.
Wow.
And learned how to navigate jets.
Yeah.
I didn't have any flying background or experience, but I love it. They teach you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So, learned how to navigate. And then, there's actually a ton of aircraft in the inventory that have navigators on them.
Oh, sure.
But a lot of people don't know that. So you get to kind of choose which one you want, and you might not get it,
right,
but you still get to at least choose, and then maybe you get it, maybe you don't. And I chose the aircraft called the RC-135. I chose it purely because of where its locations were. Right. I looked at like, where are all these planes? Smart. Where are all my options based out of? And like, I thought at first I wanted to do B-52s.
Okay.
Because I'd like get to drop bombs and kill bad guys.
Yeah.
But then I was like, B-52s are only ever stationed in North Dakota or Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
You will spend your career. If you're a B-52 guy in the Air Force, you're either going to live in Minot, North Dakota or Barksdale, Louisiana. Right. So I was like, I kind of was hoping to see the world.
Could you do jets or
no? Tall? So actually there's two tracks for navs. Okay. There's heavy navs. And there was fighter navs.
Okay.
And so I got selected for nav, and then I tried for fighter nav, and I got selected for heavy nav.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, that's like another branch, fork in the road. Fighter navs, they're either in the back seat of F-15s or they're in B-1s. There's two of them in the back of a B-1. So I got heavies, which could have been like C-130s or B-52s or AWACS and RC-135s. I chose RC-135s because they could get stationed in Okinawa, England, Greece.
Oh, wow.
They had great places. I was like, I'm taking that plane.
Yeah.
And so I got that. But this is where like all my upbringing. And so one of the things I didn't mention was like when I left home and went to college at 18, I did not ever go to church again.
Right.
I was completely burned out from church.
Yeah.
Just wanted no part of it, which really had nothing to do with my family. Family was awesome. Dad was awesome. This was not a rebelling against him. This was really about the Christian school that I had gone to. It really left a bad taste in my mouth with all the rules.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that, if you go to a really strict Christian school, parents need to hear this. If you're putting your kids at a really strict Christian school, there's a danger of them associating, mentally connecting all these rules with Christianity.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. And so, so in my rebelling against the rules of school, I just was done with the whole thing. So
it's almost like you didn't get to live out all these things that you heard other people doing in high school. And you're like, oh, I'm out from, at least me personally, I'm out from the wing of authority. Let me get into trouble and do what I want, Yeah. I don't know.
So I had nothing to do with church really all through college.
But you
I went like once or twice.
A Christian?
Oh yeah. If you would have asked me if I was a Christian, I'd been like, yeah, of course. Yeah. Absolutely I am.
And you weren't married at this time.
Right. I got married with 1 year left in college.
Okay.
I got married before my senior year.
Okay.
So Carrie and I were in an apartment. I was going to class.
How old were you then?
I was 21.
Wow.
21 and 22.
That's awesome.
Carrie had graduated and she was working full time. That was the best year of my life right there, man. She was getting up and going to work. She was getting up and going to work, and I was like going to get pancakes and lift weights and had like one class in the afternoon. And doing ROTC with the Air Force, and which is pretty easy after you've done OCS.
Right.
And so anyway, I'm flying. I'm brand new to flying. I'm brand new to the Air Force. Brand new to the amount of travel that I found myself doing, and it was awesome. And like I was kind of on a high for flying, navigating planes, being an officer in the Air Force. As I look back on my life, I see one huge moment where I screwed up and it put me on an entire path of screwing up.
Mm.
My very first TDY ever in the military, my first TDY in the military was to Key West.
Oh,
And went to Naval Air Station, Key West.
yeah. I
And
remember that's where we honeymooned. Me and my wife was
Oh, yeah.
Florida Keys. Yeah.
Big group of guys. We're all walking down the sidewalk, having a few drinks, and we walked by a strip club.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was a girl out in front of the strip club on the sidewalk, like handing out flyers to try to get guys to come in. And it was like, the flyer was, it was something like all you can drink.
Yeah.
For like $10 in a strip club. And all the guys I was with were like, all you can drink, let's do it.
Yeah.
And everybody went in, and so did I.
Yeah.
And I go in the strip club, get drunk.
Yeah.
And that was my very first TDY. And looking back on this now, I can tell exactly why that happened. It happened because I wasn't prepared with a plan for something like that to happen, right? Like I'm just like in the moment, caught off guard, and just went with it.
Yeah.
But that became a pivotal moment for me. So I continued down that bad path, flying squadrons, stationed in Nebraska, stationed in Japan. I got what I wanted. We got stationed in Okinawa. I'm flying all over the world. I'm also like training for triathlons. I was doing swimming, biking, running everywhere we would land, right?
Yeah.
We would go somewhere and land, and I would run a few miles and find a pool, and brought my bike with me on a Middle East deployment and set up a stationary bike in my trailer.
Wow.
And so I was kind of just really doing my own thing, pursuing my own stuff, very selfish, and just really going down a path of sin, lust, strip clubs, pornography, and lust.
Yeah.
And that's where things got really bad, right?
Okay.
You know, and I'm like a train wreck during this whole period. I'm moving at 1,000 miles an hour, both literally and figuratively, right? Just not good.
Yeah.
And it was really a double life, because whenever I would be home, at this point in life, we had 2 sons.
Oh, wow.
At this point in life, so we've got kids, and we're back in church now.
Yeah.
So now I'm in church. I'm the family man when I'm home, but whenever I'm out on the road, I'm a different guy.
Right. So family thinks everything's hunky dory.
Yeah.
Like you're just
in
the military doing what you're supposed to be doing.
That's right. Yeah. So then it's kind of like everything changed. We hit this what I call, it was our crisis of truth. And this was where one day Carrie was like, I want a divorce.
Oh, snap.
And it was like, that's kind of the moment where everything kind of screeches to a halt. She's just like, you're not the man that I married.
How many years have you been married at this point?
I don't remember. A lot. We had been married for a while.
For it to matter.
And so this was like my moment that opened my eyes.
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment how far I had drifted off course.
Right.
I was like, holy crap, I'm this guy.
Yeah.
I became this guy. I don't remember ever choosing to become this guy. Right. There was no moment where I decided, you know what, I want to start doing this stuff. It happened so gradually. It's one little compromise at a time.
Yeah.
One, going with these guys to this place, looking at this, texting this, and then all of a sudden you're like, this is not the guy that I wanted to be. So at that moment, I wanted to save my marriage.
Yeah.
I wanted to change. No part of me liked who I was or even wanted to continue being like that.
Yeah.
It almost felt like a relief to have this crisis, because it was like Carrie saying that she wanted a divorce. was kind of like something I needed to pull me off the conveyor belt I was on. So I started going to counseling. That was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Start going to counseling. She's in counseling. I'm in counseling. Um, there's like a very small heartbeat on our marriage, you
Right.
know, just like this tiny glimmer of hope.
Right.
And
You're on life support.
it's on life support.
Yeah.
Um,
On the ventilator.
I'm in counseling for months
Yeah.
when I had this moment. I had an absolute moment, and it's where I was reading actually. I was reading My Utmost for His Highest,
That's good.
and so I'm like, I'm really working. I'm trying hard to change, and reading that. And one morning, it just hit me that I may have been a Christian before,
Yeah.
but there was always this one section of my life
Right.
that I kind of had a little fence around that I had never given to God. And I tried to be like a Christian in this category, but do my own thing in this category and keep this. And I was reading, My Utmost one morning, and it just hit me. He said, like if you've got an area that you haven't given to God, that's the entire problem right there. And, being born again only occurs when you go all in.
Right.
And you can't have an area and you can't have a fence, and you got to tear that down and push all your chips in the middle and go all in. And those are all my words, not Oswald Chambers.
Right.
And that's what I did.
So that fenced in part of your life was those things that you listed previously.
Yeah.
It's just the partying and the
That's right.
strip club and the lust.
So
it's funny, like we think, and I'm, the same for me, but if we're not swimming upstream in our Christian walk, we're floating down, we're floating the opposite direction.
That's absolutely right.
People say, oh, I'm just kind of stagnant. I'm stagnant right now in my walk with Christ. There's no such thing. You're either swimming upstream towards God or floating in the opposite direction.
I actually use this a lot when I talk to men out, this current of a stream mentality, because the other part of that is everything good that we want in life is upstream.
Right.
And it requires an effort to get to it.
Yeah.
Like the dad you want to be, the husband you want to be, everything you want to be, it requires effort to swim upstream. And everything we don't want to be, it's downstream.
Yeah.
And you can get there by just doing nothing.
Right.
If you just do nothing and float, you're going downstream. So this was an amazing time in my life.
Yeah.
So Carrie and I were able to save our marriage. We did lots of counseling. She had a counselor. We had a couples counselor. And through this whole process, what I really saw was how amazing it changed my life and powerful it was. And I realized, like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Is I want to do for other men
what was done for you,
what was done for me, what this counselor did for me, and how that helped me. It took a couple years. This was a process here of about 3-ish years of going through this counseling and sleeping on the idea every night of maybe doing this. It wasn't a quick thing. It was, like I said, between 2 to almost 3 years or more. And then, I'm always looking at like, okay, getting out of the Air Force is coming up. By now I'm no longer flying. I'm at a desk job, and realizing like what I want to do after the Air Force is help other people. It made me realize this too. Like, as guys, we got to know like what mountains we are most prone to crash into, And so, we've got a podcast on this called High Terrain.
Right.
And talking about how in the Air Force, we would mark on our chart where the high terrain is. This is the thing you got to watch out for. And I think a lot of men are just kind of flying through life and they haven't marked their high terrain. They don't realize, they're like me walking down that sidewalk in Key West. It's like, you better know and mark your high terrain and then go out of your way to not fly near it.
Right.
the other thing I talk about a lot is being 1 degree off. Right. And so we've got a podcast on that too. And so I began to see all this and kind of like God started bringing everything together. And I'm putting together like, okay, this is why I messed up. This is why I got to where I was. I tolerated being 1 degree off. Every day I was another degree off and I tolerated it. And I said, it's not a big deal. I'm still holding it all together. So I wasn't, getting back on course. I wasn't avoiding the high terrain. And I'm like, okay, I know how I have to live now going forward. I know what changes I have to make, and I want to help other men make that too. So at this point, I really went all in on reading.
Oh, gosh.
So I really started studying Christianity now, and actually like wanting to be a guy who could talk about his faith.
Because you're not into apologetics yet at this point.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And when I was flying in the Air Force, if somebody would have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said yes, if asked.
Right.
But I would not have like voluntarily brought that up. And part of that was because I knew that my lifestyle and my testimony was in the trash.
Exactly.
So I can't open my mouth to tell anybody about Christ because people just look at me like, "Are you freaking kidding?"
Right. It's almost like when somebody asks you that, it's kind of like cringy. Like, don't ask me that. But
yeah, yes, exactly.
I am. No, I'm not a good representation of it, but I am.
Yeah.
Like, even if I can be a Christian, even you can.
Yeah.
Like, see how easy it is.
And you know what? And I've thought about this a lot, and it always causes me pain. But there were little moments throughout my career, where I would cross paths with a solid Christian dude, and you're just kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
And you try to tell yourself stuff like, "Oh, he's probably not having any fun,"
right?
But the truth is,
he's not relatable.
Yeah,
he's not relatable to us.
He's always the guy that doesn't go out with the squadron.
Right.
He's never at any of your events. He's not going anywhere.
I always thought of myself, I'm the cool Christian. I'm the one that guys can see like, oh, Christians aren't weird or anything. He's a cool guy.
We need to be weird.
I'll be attractive.
We better be weird.
I thought I was being the attractive Christian.
Yeah. So, I started reading stuff like I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
Yeah.
Reasonable Faith. Case for Christ.
Yeah.
Getting into this whole world of these authors.
Yeah.
And it just really opened my eyes. And kind of right around this time, so my marriage is doing great. I'm in a great men's group. I'm learning a lot. I think I know what I want to be when I get out of the Air Force at this point. I start working on that degree. So I'm taking that master's degree to do that. And the other thing at this time is I started getting frustrated with other Christians and specifically with the church, not like any one specific church, but just kind of like the church in America.
Frustrated with what?
I would probably phrase it like they weren't offensive enough. I saw in the church in America, I saw the old me in flying squadrons. It's like churches were not being offensive enough. And I realized I'm doing all this reading and I'm like, the gospel is offensive. Jesus was offensive. That's why they killed him.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't water down anything. He called the religious leaders a group of snakes.
Yeah.
He said they were whitewashed tombs that looked good on the outside, but were full of death and decay inside. I don't see any Christians speaking that clearly, on truth nowadays. So I'm seeing like what's going on in churches in America, and I'm doing this reading, and I'm getting really frustrated that what you hear a lot of in a lot of churches is messages on things like charity, kindness, forgiveness. And when you think about it, those are all things that an atheist would agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this moment where I'm like, you know what? I'd walk out of church sometimes and be like, I think an atheist would have agreed with single thing that was said. We should be kind. We should help people, slow to anger, give to the poor. And you're like, this is just trying to please everybody. This is totally inoffensive.
But which are all true things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are true things, but they're not the gospel.
Right.
So the gospel is offensive. It says you're a sinner, you need a savior, and there is only one way. There's only one savior. There's one path. And the gate is wide that leads to destruction and narrow that leads to life. And there's no other way except through Jesus.
Yeah. The gospel's calling you out on your crap.
It absolutely is. So,
which is offensive.
I'm going through this stage. I'm like a little disappointed and realizing this and trying to learn more. And, the more I learned about Jesus, the more it made me hate the old me.
Yeah.
But the more it fired me up to try to help other men too. And it made me really hate the lukewarm Christians. And so, this kind of all comes into what would eventually become Men's Alliance. Cause you think about this, you can't be a good ambassador for Jesus if you're politically correct.
Right.
We got another podcast, Be More Offensive.
Yeah.
Right. Episode 49 is Be More Offensive. Jesus was offensive. We need to be more offensive. That's what the gospel is. And not offensive in like our manner, right? We should be kind and gracious and full of tact. But I mean, offensive in that we're not watering down that there's only one way to heaven,
right? And
all other paths other than Jesus lead to destruction. That's what I mean by offensive. Like not trying to do this, all paths are equally good,
right?
Oprah thing, right?
Yeah. And not saying things that aren't coming from a place of love at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I realized like we need an organization in this country. We need a ministry that's training men. And this is like kind of, I'm doing all this apologetics reading, but I'm also doing all this work in counseling and group work and working on my education for it too. And I'm kind of like pulling all this together. And I'm like, we need a ministry that trains men, both how to be better husbands and fathers from this world, and also better disciples and ambassadors for Christ.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like combine all this stuff that I'm doing into one ministry. So that's what was going on. I was like, we need barbarian ambassadors.
Yeah.
Right. Because also the other message going on there in this whole cultural moment is, people are calling masculinity toxic.
Yeah.
Right. And, and you just see the feminization of churches everywhere. And you're like, man, we've got to put together something that answers all of these problems. Yeah. So, I think of this too. I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and they have a very specific mission.
Yeah.
Kill people and break their stuff. That's all we're trying to do in the Air Force.
Yeah.
We're trying to kill people and break their things.
Yeah.
And every job in the Air Force, whether it's finance, meteorology, mechanic, intelligence, everybody exists to try to help get those bombs on that target.
Right.
It's all for this one very specific cause, and it's a very offensive cause.
Yeah.
Right. And you won't be able to accomplish your mission if you're trying to not offend. You have to be able to put bombs on target. And that's kind of what I see us doing in Men's Alliance right now is we're trying to put bombs on target. And I would say our bombs are our weapons are truth. That's what we're trying to do is we have to be, as Christian men in this nation, we've got to be okay with offending people with the truth when we talk about the truth. So, I said in a podcast recently, I said that I admired George Washington. Yeah. And a guy got all worked up about that.
Yeah.
And he said essentially that I should have chosen somebody else to say that I admired. He said you should have chosen a better person to tell everybody you admire because George Washington owned slaves. And so this guy was a sinner, George Washington, so I shouldn't have chosen him. And I really thought about his response. I thought about what he told me, and I'm thinking about my life and the second chance that I've been given, both by God and by my wife, and like instantly the example of King David from the Bible came to mind.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, this guy was an adulterer and a murderer. And throughout the New Testament, Jesus talks about King David.
Yeah.
He references David. You know what's funny is Jesus never once says, when he says David, he never says, now this guy did some bad things, and so I'm not condoning all of his life, right? Like he never caveats it.
No.
And, you know, another one is Paul. Paul killed Christians.
Right.
And Jesus chose him. So I kind of put this to bed with the realization. I'm like, you know what? God chose sinners.
Right.
He chose sinners like David, sinners like Paul.
And how many amazing followers did those two guys have, you know, that looked up to them
Absolutely.
and died for them? You know what I mean? I mean, just David's mighty men, that whole story is just incredible.
I love that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
David's one of my all-time heroes. I can't wait to meet him in heaven.
So I'm like, man, we are all about using people with a bad past, with sins in their past. And you don't have to caveat it. You don't have to explain it away. Jesus didn't. And you know what? Like, God gave me another chance. God's going to use me. God didn't write off Paul. God didn't write off David. I'm not writing off George Washington.
Yeah.
And I'm not writing off myself either, because I'll tell you what, Satan wants to use every single one of our pasts to keep us on the sideline.
Right.
And I will tell you, there have been many moments over these past 7+ years of Men's Alliance that I felt unqualified to do this, unqualified to lead, right? Because Satan is throwing my past back at me all the time. And I'm like, every day I've got to not let that define me,
right?
You know, to use our creed. So I think it's awesome that the whole thing with George Washington came up just the other day as I was preparing for this podcast, because it hit me. I'm like, that's exactly what we need to all do.
Right.
Is we need to reject that little urge to sideline somebody because of their past.
Yeah.
And also the culture that we're currently living in America right now, it's also the politically correct thing to do is sideline that person.
Right.
Right. So that's the inoffensive thing to do, is sideline that person, because if you use them as an example, you're going to offend somebody.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to be bold about talking about our past.
Yeah.
And then stepping right over it and moving beyond it, not letting it define us, not letting it keep us on the sideline either.
That's right.
You think about it, that is our creed.
Yeah.
My past failures do not define me.
Right.
And that goes for the Apostle Paul.
Yep.
It goes for King David. It goes for George Washington, and it goes for Goose.
That's right. And Shadow. Definitely
Oh,
Shadow.
big time for Shadow.
It's just funny if the Bible would probably not even be a chapter long if it only had perfect people in it, you know?
Yeah, it would only be about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like every person in the Bible that's written about is flawed in some way, you know? And that's, I think, why they made it into the scriptures, is so we can relate. You know?
I'm so glad that that they did not leave out the stories of their sins.
All their transgressions,
If they would have left out David's affair,
right,
or his murder cover up, or Paul's executing, you know, Christians, putting them in prison, if they would have left that stuff out because it makes them look bad, where would we be?
Right.
We would be feeling like we should just shut up and stay on the sideline because we're utter failures.
Yeah.
But now we have these examples to look to and pick ourselves back up from. So that's my story. It's a story of a second chance.
Wow.
And also it cracks me up because God has a real sense of humor.
I mean, hello,
So
here I am.
God's got a sense of humor because he took the guy that was executing Christians and got him to write the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote most of the books in the New Testament, Paul.
Right.
And he took the guy who was the adulterer and murderer, and Jesus chose to come be born from his descendants.
Wow. Yeah.
And God took me, scumbag, liar, adulterer at heart, and used me to start a men's ministry
Right.
to help other guys become better husbands
Yeah.
and fathers. That's comedy. And God's got a good sense of humor.
He's still working on me to make me what I ought to be.
He's working on us all, brother.
I know.
And so, my message for guys listening to this are, God uses only imperfect people,
Right.
because that is the only kind of people that there are.
Yeah.
Right. Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned."
Right.
That's all of us.
He doesn't use, and I've always found so much comfort in this because so many of us think we're not worthy to do anything for Christ, and we're not.
That's
like
good.
God doesn't care about our worthiness because none of us are worthy. He just wants your willingness. So if you're willing to do his work, he will provide a way for you to do it.
That's good.
He just wants your willingness.
He also, my other failure was my lack of testimony for Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. I think all those years in flying squadrons, keeping my mouth shut,
Yeah.
not ever talking about Jesus, and now that's almost all that I do.
Right.
Right. That's just about all that I do now is work on being a better ambassador, learning how to speak up, and to point other men in that direction as well.
Yeah. I watched the end of Fury this morning.
Yeah.
Where he just says, I think about this verse many times.
Send me.
Yeah. I'm the Lord. Who will go for me? Here am I. Send me.
Yeah.
And I think you answered that call, man. That's awesome.
So, whatever it is our stories are, and as I look back on mine and I look at these major themes, right? So, there's knee surgeries, there's military, there's flying, there's triathlons, there's lust, there's a moment of crisis, and doing a 180, and then that's where real life began.
Yeah.
Right. That's where real life began. I have more joy, more fun, more peace in my life now than I ever did before.
Wow.
And plus, you start to realize, and this is the coolest part, you start to realize that everything you went through was training for a very specific reason.
I know. Yeah.
And, I've seen several of those moments throughout the years where something that you thought, man, why did I ever do that? Or why did I ever go through that? Or why did God ever put me there? You'll see some of them happen in real life now. And you're like, oh, man. But they haven't all yet. So there's still a lot of unknowns out there that I look forward to.
Right. Right. And you got to take peace in the fact that some things we'll never know, until we get to heaven. Like why God put us through certain situations or experiences. Some we'll never know, or we'll never recognize when maybe we should have. But like you wouldn't have recognized that conversation unless Carrie was there to point it out to you.
Yeah.
We all need a Carrie.
Yeah. I need a lot of things pointed out for me. But guys, I think one of my most important messages to guys listening to this is don't sideline yourself. Don't take yourself out of the game. To put this in 2024 language, don't cancel yourself, right? Don't get into this cancel culture of this person said something terrible or did something terrible, and now we can't have anything to do with this person. That is the absolute opposite of the Men's Alliance Creed. It's also the absolute opposite of the Bible, right? And so nobody's ever canceled, no matter what you've done, no matter how bad you think you are. Remember, Paul killed Christians, and God used him to write the New Testament. So
Mm.
whatever it is, dude, don't cancel yourself. Don't cancel others. We've got to not let our past failures define us. And believe me, my story that I just shared, it's exactly what I was thinking of when I wrote that line in the creed is
Yeah.
my past failures do not define me. When
Yeah.
the world knocks me down, I will get back up every time. Faithfulness to family and devotion to God will be my legacy. I will finish strong. So now you know a little bit of Goose's second chance story. Hope it helps you guys, right? That's why I wanted to share it. I hope that somebody finds that to be helpful and encouraging for them in their Christian walk as well. So, you know, as always, shoot us a line if you've got something to say, right? Leave a comment on YouTube and share if this is any way helped you. And we'd love to hear that from you and correspond with you there.
Well, yeah, man, just thanks again for doing this. Like, something that I just knew would make an awesome podcast, and just I know you have such an awesome story, and I think so many
Thanks
guys,
for having me on the show.
Yeah, so many guys wanted to know this, so me included. So just thanks for being vulnerable and sharing. So
absolutely,
that was awesome.
That's what we're all about. Real.
That's right.
There's the real part. All right, guys.
We'll see you around the fire. Thanks.